Hello and welcome to Real Men Feel. I am your host, Andy Grant. If you're joining us for the first time, or if you're joining us for the 34th time, Real Men Feel is all about creating a space for men to allow and express and get into and be okay with whatever they are feeling. We do that via this weekly podcast. We do that at a website called realmenfeel.org. We do that with a private Facebook group. We do it with a public Facebook page called Real Men Feel Show on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter at realmenfeel.org. But we gather here every Tuesday at 8 p.m. live, and then we're syndicated onto YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, and beyond, just to talk about being a dude. What shows up? What's it all about? Sometimes we have guests. Sometimes we even have women guests because, yes, before being a man, we're actually human, and we accept other humans here as well. With me, as always, is my friend and co-host, Appio Hunter.
Hey, Andy.
How you doing today?
Great. I'm actually really glad that we're doing the show tonight because it gives us a nice break from what's going on outside of...
Yes. For anyone catching the show later, tonight is election night in the United States. Polls have closed where I am in Massachusetts, but they must still be open for you right now, yes?
Yes, they are. I'm 2 hours behind you, and they still are open. Interesting thing about here in Utah is that we actually do have not only early voting, but we also have vote by mail. So I actually turned in my ballot about a week or so ago.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I didn't even have to worry about it. I just stayed at home and chilled, most of the day. And ironically, I had today off. So it was perfect.
Awesome. So for this week's show, it's Appio and I. We're going to talk about being a man among men, the notion of spending time in male-only groups. This is really coming about because 2 weeks ago, in episode 32, I shared about my experience with the Mankind Project's New Warrior Training Adventure, which was a weekend event of nothing but men. And it was my first time doing any sort of personal growth event, transformational event, even a class that was nothing but men. And this past weekend was the graduation and homecoming, and we got to gather again and see the staff and see my fellow new brothers. Most of them showed up, and it was really nice. And that morning, my old shit showed up. Like, oh, I don't want to go there. It's gonna be stupid and lame. I don't know what we're gonna do there. I should just blow this off. And I was like, no, I told people I was going, and this is a habit I've had far back as I can remember, that I'll promise friends to do something. Yeah, I'm all in, I'm into that. And I just blow them off. Don't tell them I'm not coming. I just blow it off. But I'd say, no, the big part of it was, integrity and commitment. So I was like, I'm going. And it was really good because I heard lots of great feedback about this very show. We picked up a lot of new subscribers, new fans. It was great to hear from people. And it was great to hear other guys talk about what they've noticed in themselves. And there were also family members saying what they had noticed in their men in the previous 2 weeks. So it was really cool just to witness that. But, so that's what kind of got us on this subject. But as I was sharing all of that, my experience with the Mankind Project, Appio's had his own experiences with male-only groups and scenarios. So we wanted to make the space to dive deeper into that.
Sure, yeah. So might as well just jump right in. My experience really goes back a couple of decades, actually. For those who have been following the show pretty much since its inception, you know a little bit about my background, and I've talked a little bit about it, but tonight's going to be kind of a big deal for me because it's really where I open up in more detail about some of my previous experiences and talk about that and where it led me and how I ended up getting involved with men's groups as part of my own healing process. So, for those who are just joining us for the first time, I grew up LDS. I grew up in an LDS family, LDS for Latter-day Saint Mormon family. For those who aren't familiar with the terminology, I've been noticing that in mainstream media nowadays, they are actually starting to refer to Mormons as LDS because that's how Mormons refer to themselves, Latter-day Saints. So I grew up in a Mormon family and grew up in a community that was, very, very religious, very conservative, which was a bit of a challenge because, I had always identified myself, not really identified myself, but I had always held an attraction toward other men. And so growing up gay in a Mormon family in that type of a religious community was very, very challenging. Around the time I was in my late teens, early 20s, I experienced some very traumatic events that led me to decide that, I just couldn't deal with this anymore. And I wound up going through conversion therapy. And that time in conversion therapy was actually what took me to the point where I ended up getting involved with other men's groups in order to, as again, part of my healing process. Conversion therapy was not known as conversion therapy back at the time that I was actually going through it. Back then, it was actually known as reparative therapy. What's interesting is that I found the name change to be rather curious. Probably because of the pushback it is getting not only from just society in general, but most especially from within the psychological community, the American Psychological Association and others within the medical community, that there's nothing to repair, because the whole idea behind it was that somehow it was very rooted. Conversion therapy is very much rooted in disproven theories, much of it taken from Freudian thinking. And, the absent father, overbearing mother, not being able to identify with other men, and so therefore you have this attraction to other men because you have never been able to identify with them in a healthy way. And so all of that was part of the whole conversion therapy experience, or as it was called, reparative. And they're trying to repair that identity, if you will.
Is this something you sought out and want to be part of, or is it something kind of your family sent you to? Like, how did it play out for you ending up there?
My mom had held it in the back burner for a long time, actually. She had been aware of it, but was looking for the right opportunity to present it to me. Then when I had a very, very traumatic breakup with somebody that I had been seeing, it was distressful enough that she presented it to me. I was like, okay, yes, I'll do it. So it was completely voluntary on my part. And I saw it as, yeah.
So you were at least open to the idea that maybe there's something in me that does need repairing?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. And so, I started going to therapy. I started, getting, and because it was presented as kind of like a life-saving type of a thing, I was in a desperate situation. It was the first time that I had come very close to taking my own life. And as in our own conversations, that even though I had never actually attempted suicide, I'd come very close to that on multiple occasions. I was just too chicken shit to actually follow through and try to do it.
It's a good thing.
Absolutely. Fear actually ended up saving me. Fear was one of those times when fear actually ended up serving me and serving me well. For most times, it's actually screwed up my life, but. That's a whole different topic and episode of Real Men Feel, about how fear can really screw us up. So yeah, I went into it, and of course, I think that's one of the more insidious parts of. Well, let me take a step back. I don't want to approach this from the place of anger or criticism or anything like that, because there were aspects of the therapy that were helpful. It taught me how to build good relationships, solid relationships that were non-sexual, for one. It taught me how to appreciate myself and really take a hard look at myself and ask myself questions and take responsibility for myself. So there were elements of the conversion therapy that were good for me. But nevertheless, it seems to really prey on the person who is desperate for some type of validation. And in the end, my experience is very much what many other people had experienced, which was a love-hate relationship. You learn to love yourself and hate everything about you. There was, had reached a level of self-loathing, because it's, even though, I was doing all the things I was told to do, pray, go to church, go, read the scriptures, blah, 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 all of the religious things, with elements of psychology that were mixed in with that. It was, I still, I had those attractions and everything else. In fact, I wrote a rather humorous piece. In fact, I shared it with you one time a while back, about my experience in conversion therapy, and how really the best thing that came out of it is that I several awesome blowjobs, So,
So is that in the flyer?
That one they leave out. That one they deliberately leave out. So, but during this process, I started getting involved with a group called Evergreen International. Evergreen was the Mormon equivalent of Exodus International. Exodus was, for probably many people might have heard of Exodus. It was an evangelical Christian group that was very much promoter of the conversion therapy. And a number of years ago, it ended up being completely discredited. The whole organization ended up falling apart because the president himself said, stepped forward publicly and said, "This does not work. And I'm so sorry for the harm that we've done." And I can tell you from my own personal experience, there are people with whom I went through conversion therapy that are no longer with us. They did take their lives. And it was a direct result of the experiences that they had. They learned, rather than learning to love and appreciate themselves, it had the opposite effect. They ended up hating themselves even more. And really, they couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle it. Yeah, I was in that space too, because it's like, something's broken, something's wrong with me. Yes, I need to be repaired and so forth. But so becoming a member of this organization was kind of like a way of associating with other men, and a way of organizing things, working as a team, working as, because I ended up being on the steering committee for several of the conferences that were held. And again, learning to have a type of interaction, and learning, healthy, non-trauma drama type of interactions with other men, again, was a good experience. And eventually I'm like, you know what, this isn't working for me. I need to go somewhere else. I need to do something else. I need to go somewhere where nobody really knows of my background, knows of my history, and just learn how to be me, learn how to be amongst men, be a man amongst men, and just truly be comfortable in my own skin. And that's when I was still in my early 20s, so I was still going to school at the University of Utah, and I decided, why not join a fraternity? So I did. I joined the fraternity, and it was the most amazing experience I ever had. Like you, when you were talking about the New Warrior training and your experience of just being amongst all these men, my very first experience, when I went through the whole rush week and, trying to decide which house I wanted to join and so forth, I ended up joining a Mormon fraternity, Sigma Gamma Chi. And our chapter, the chapter that I joined, had this retreat, a weekend retreat. So when they accepted the new members, they took all of the new members who had just pledged, all the new pledges, up to the advisor's cabin up in the mountains, and we just spent an incredible time up there, just bonding, talking, playing basketball, whatever. Just it was the first time that I felt like I was really being accepted for myself. Yes, granted, I was withholding a part of myself, but I didn't feel like I was really withholding a part of myself. I was like, you know what, that part's behind me. I no longer identify. My identity is no longer tied to my sexual orientation. My identity is tied to me as a human being. And the fact that, I happened to be attracted to other men was a non-issue at that point in my life. And it still is a non-issue now.
But so you, let me just understand. You realized you were still attracted to other men then.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a big aspect.
Exactly. No, it was not a big aspect of my life. For me, it was more, I was more focused on healing, on growing, on getting to know myself as a human being, having good experiences as a human being. That was the first real period in my life where I was introduced to the whole idea of personal growth. And some of the ideas that were and concepts that are the foundation of the whole personal growth movement and personal development movement. It was an amazing, honestly, it was an amazing time. And I ended up becoming an officer in the fraternity. I become very, very involved. We had this award ceremony every year called the Golden Betties, and every year the statues were they were made from scratch. They were really funny. Usually just a bunch of broken Barbie dolls that were stuck onto a frisbee and then painted gold. And depending on the award, they were made into some really funny positions. But I was surprised to be honored a couple of years with the Die Hard award. I was like the chapter Die Hard. I was like always there, always involved, always in the middle of everything, being the brother for all the brothers, being the brother that people could always go to and rely on for anything. And so it was an incredible experience, and an experience that I've never had since. And so when you were talking about the new warrior training and what you guys went through, especially since it was just an all-male group, it took me back to those days. It reminded me of those beautiful years when I was still in college, and even shortly after I stayed involved with the fraternity for a while. Shortly after I left school, I was still involved, still going to the weekends, very much a part of being part of that brotherhood, being a man amongst men. It was like you. I felt a level of enthusiasm that just sent me through the roof, and at the same time, I was having a hard time. Even now, I have a hard time finding the words to describe what the experience is like. And it wasn't your typical fraternity, booze and boobs and everything else. No, it was because it was sponsored by a religious institution. There were certain standards and so forth, which I was actually kind of grateful for. And that's one of the reasons why I deliberately chose that particular fraternity to join. Just because I didn't feel like I wouldn't be pressured into having to prove myself as a man by, boffing, the sorority girls next door or whatever.
Right. So it wasn't the Animal House style of house at all.
No, it wasn't. It really wasn't. So that was perhaps my biggest fear. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, what if I'm expected, what if I'm outed or whatever? And I'm really glad that I joined that fraternity that had those particular standards and expectations of their members, because it really did help me experience something that, I found that was really interesting. And this is something that we had talked about before in a previous episode. I can't remember which one. How when I was talking about same gender attraction, and you made a comment about, I noticed that you said same gender attraction versus same sex attraction, and the reason why I always chose that deliberately and chose the same gender things deliberately is because as human beings, and especially as men, we have this interesting way of always trying to mix sex in with everything. We've had episodes where we've talked about that, how we tend to hypersexualize or over-sexualize everything. And so it was a really good experience for me to be in a place where the sexual aspects of being a man were secondary to just being a man.
So do you think you wouldn't have gotten there if you hadn't gone through that therapy experience?
Yes, the therapy experience was actually, in a funny way, it actually ended up leading to a very positive experience. So the therapy itself ended up causing a lot of damage, which even now I'm surprised to find some of the residual scars from that experience still popping up. Knee-jerk and fearful reactions that from that time still, surprise me occasionally. But had it not been for that, had it not been for my involvement, I was actually for a while, I was kind of held up as like a poster boy of how no reparative therapy worked. I met with high authorities within the Mormon Church, and was one of the key members of the conference committee that helped organize the conferences and everything else. Got to know many people. We actually reached out to a number of members, high placed members within Exodus International. I got to know them, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and that involvement. Had it not been for that, because when I commit to something, I'm 110% into it. It's all or nothing for me. And it's like either, damn it, I'm going to be straight, or no, I'm not going to be around. And there is a direct correlation between my experience in the reparative therapy or conversion therapy and getting involved with the fraternity, getting involved with other men's groups, and having that experience and being able to really be there. Now I feel even better and more comfortable in my own skin, knowing that I can just be a man with a husband amongst other men and not have it be an issue.
Mm. When you were kind of held up as the success of this program, did you believe it, quote unquote, worked, or were you just more comfortable in hiding or shutting down?
I genuinely believed at the time that it was working, because I was so focused on healing that I didn't have time to think about, am I dating somebody? Am I, whatever. I mean, yes, there were opportunities would arise, no pun intended. Sure, yes, I would take advantage of those opportunities of having an experience with another guy or whatever, but it wasn't my focus. And so I genuinely believed that because I was focused on becoming a good human being, that it was working. And yet, I look back on that time and I think, I was deceiving myself. I was so wanting to believe the story I was telling myself. I wanted to believe it. I desperately wanted to believe it. And yet I knew that it was just another story.
Well, yeah. I find it amazing that you have a positive spin, and like it ended up bringing you to somewhere that really did help you and bring you healing. Because I've only heard stories of someone went into this and ended up in suicide. They just ended up just worse and worse and worse. So I guess being the golden boy of this pill therapy is did serve you, right?
It did serve me. It really, really did. It's funny because even though I stay in contact with a lot of my old fraternity brothers, they all know about me now, and it's not a big deal. And for those who have chosen not to associate with me, that's fine. And those who have continued to be a support, and those who have continued to identify themselves as my brothers, I'm even more grateful to them. I'm even more grateful that we can still because honestly, that is such a small aspect of our experience as human beings, and especially as men, but most importantly as human beings. I personally look forward to the day when the biological drive to keep the species alive becomes just that. It's a matter of biology and not an all-consuming aspect of our psyche and our personalities and how we make decisions and everything else. I look forward to that day. I can see how the Mankind Project helps to reinforce being a responsible male. And I'm gratified and I'm encouraged to see how many men's groups around the world are recognizing that that it's important to separate, to recognize that it's very much a part of who we are, but B, separate it out so that we can focus on being human beings, being complete and whole human beings, responsible human beings. And that's one aspect of our personality. It's one aspect of our existence. It's a very wonderful, incredible part of our existence.
Yeah, so it's cool to see, to witness that changing in society too. Not this is a men's group and we mean straight men, and over here we have the gay men's group, and now it is just men's group.
Exactly, and I can tell at least certainly from our generation, because we were very close in age. Our generation, there still is kind of like that idea of the separation of and boys. It's funny because I actually do go to men's groups that are exclusively focused on the LGBT community, or the G aspect of the community, and for older men. Because as you age, unfortunately, the LGBT community, particularly the gay male community, is so youth-focused, so youth-centric, so obsessed with youth and beauty and everything else that as you age, you just kind of get cast aside. And so I do, go as to participate and also to help, support those who need that emotional support, to provide that sense of community. It's a different dynamic. It is a different dynamic because, in that time and in that generation, especially if we get a bunch of gay men together, there are those elements of the trauma and drama that just, you want to face palm. It's like, oh my God, this is so cliche and so stereotypical. Yet at the same time, I can see how the community itself has evolved, especially those of us who were considered part of the pioneering generations, to help bring about that acceptance, the general societal acceptance.
And it was the beginning of this, I think it was February or March of this year, that I first created my in-person men's group that I facilitate.
Right.
And I knew I wanted to be open to men of any sexual orientation or however they identify themselves. And I think it was the second meeting, and I intentionally didn't have any rules, didn't really say anything, but I was like, here's what I think, and I want to be open. And does anyone here have an issue with if this was open and regardless of sexual orientation? And two guys were like, well, I hope not, because I'm gay. I'm like, oh, great, we're already past this hurdle then. Fine, it doesn't have to be addressed, and it just organic.
Exactly.
Everyone's here.
Let's move on.
Yeah,
yeah, and I really see how we have, as a society, generally we have moved on. Yes, there are those who, and again, this is not meant as criticism, merely an observation. There are those who have deeply held religious beliefs, dogmatic beliefs, for them, it's just like, oh my gosh, and they'll send them off into a frenzy. And to that, I simply say, you know what? Everybody is entitled to their beliefs. But as long as we are obsessed with what other people are doing, we're never going to be able to truly become the best human beings we can be. Yeah. We're not going to be able to be live the most joyful lives we can live.
Right. Yeah, I mean, change is the one constant, right? Yep. And if you're doing even if you're not doing any sort of personal growth, you're growing and you're expanding. You might fight it, resist it, deny it, but we all. And, it wasn't very many years ago that initially when same-sex marriage was really showing up, I was against it. I thought it was a horrible idea. And as I got challenged on it, I realized, I just think it's a bad idea because it's not what I'm used to. And what if this happens? Like, nothing. Yeah. All right. What if I'm opposed to nothing here? So
I had issues with it. I couldn't, bring myself to support it when it was first starting to break out onto the scene and so forth, because, another part of me focusing on being the best human being I can be was not really getting involved with the LGBT community. I am involved. I'm more involved now than I ever have been in the past, because I see how the community. I've always known that the community wasn't just the bar going, trauma and drama crowd at all. Yet, inevitably, when my husband and I would associate and go out with other gay couples, there was always just kind of like something going on that we're like, oh, we don't need this. We don't want this in our lives. So we have made a conscious choice to just be a couple, not a gay couple, just a couple. We have made a conscious choice to have friends that are not part of that community. In fact, to this day, when I go to activities, for the men's group, for the older and more mature gay men, Ivan won't go. He just does not want to go. It's like, sorry, but he doesn't want to have anything to do with it whatsoever. Whereas me, it's like, these are part of our community as a whole. These men are part of our community. And they deserve as much recognition as human beings as the rest of us. Ivan has his challenges with his previous experiences as well. And it's a generational thing for sure. It's a generational thing. And I'm not going to be, force him to do anything he doesn't want to do. So
I wonder if the stereotype of the dramatic gay man, like, could that be at all like rooted in just a gay man's more willingness to speak about what they're feeling and what's going on?
Oh gosh, we could do probably 5 episodes about that whole thing. These are my observations. My observation is that yes, to answer your question, yes, the fully accepting flamboyant flame of a gay man that, is the stereotypical, just out there in your face, that is one part of the community. They are the most vocal part of the community. Just like, you can paint with a very broad brush and say that everybody of a particular political, persuasion are environmentalist extremists or bigoted, Ku Klux Klanners or whatever. I mean, it's general overgeneralization. But because they are so in your face about how they live their lives, they absolutely end up becoming like part of the stereotypical aspect. In fact, there's a show a while back I remember. I actually rather enjoyed it a lot. It was Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. It was on Bravo, and the one of the 5 queer guys that were helping out the straight men become these awesome guys. The one who ended up getting booked for all the interviews and getting all the attention was the most flamboyant one, Carson Cretley. And I'm like, because there is this image, and Hollywood itself, in spite of probably 40 to 45% of all the people that work in Hollywood are members of the LGBT community, and not all of them at all are the crazy flamboyance type. But because that is the image that Hollywood has expected, that's what continues to get portrayed.
Right. Yeah. To be easily identified, not having to question, is he gay? Is he straight? Does it matter? You want, yes. Who's obviously gay? We need one of them for our show. Bang.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's get the token gay guy, and then that's it. But there's so many. I mean, I have been thrilled to see how more and more men who just live their lives as they choose to live it. They don't. I mean, I'm one of those. I don't know all of the Broadway tunes. If anything, I don't like Broadway tunes. Okay, I don't. I did not get the decorator gene. There's so many things about me that just don't fit that stereotype at all. And the majority of the community is like that. But what I found is that what happened is, at least in my generation, before the millennials, before the big transition and so forth, my generation and generations that came before, when they were obviously, if they came out, they would be rejected by their families. So they go to be embraced by the very community that's supposed to accept them. But in this community, there's a certain there's a checklist of behaviors that you must adhere to. You must know your show tunes. You must do this. You must do that, and all of it. And I'm like, I don't care about any of that. I don't care about the types of crystal that I have in my case at home. I don't care about the dinner parties. I don't care about any of that. I just I just want to be me, and yet, and part of it was, the trauma and drama, just, getting caught up in everybody's shit and everything else. And that was the more dysfunctional aspect of the community. And what I found was it was a shocking discovery, and there are many, many members of the LGBT community who will confirm this, and that is LGBT community treats itself worse than the society at large has ever treated them. They tend to discriminate more against each other than society does, than general society does. I mean, it's awful. So, you've already been rejected once. And then in order not to be rejected again by the very community that's supposed to embrace you, you start engaging in doing these things that honestly are really not part of who you are. And so that dysfunctional behavior, the bitchy, catty, image of the drama queen, ends up becoming part of the popular imagery and almost a mandatory aspect of gay life, at least in previous generations, because of the desperate need to fit in, the desperate need to be accepted, because you've already been rejected once. And thank God we're not there anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So does the Mormon Church still have this sort of conversion reparative therapy happening? Is this still a thing?
It is no longer officially part of the LDS social services, but they are still supportive of it. So there's no longer an official stance on it. It's no longer officially practiced by therapists that are associated with the church. But it is still very much accepted and encouraged, if you will, just not in an official capacity. Yeah. It's unfortunate. It's interesting because not long ago I ran into a couple of missionaries from the church, and we were talking, and I'm always open and happy to talk to them, and and they went to the whole spiel of we're representatives of Jesus Christ. Would you be interested? And I said, no, I have members of my family who are Mormon. But have you ever thought about accepting the gospel and being baptized? I have chosen a path that works well for me. Besides, I'm not really welcome. According to official church doctrine, I am an apostate. And so I didn't say anything else. They're just kind of like, oh, you can see there, like the gears were working in their head. And so eventually, they said, oh, so do you live alone? No, I live with my husband. Then I'm like, oh, okay, now they understand the whole apostate, comment and so forth. But I thought it was just an interesting interaction. What I found is that there was a time, and I still have my knee-jerk reactions to just evangelical or religious institutions in general. That's my human side, having those reactions. But I've been grateful for the opportunity to interact and to have those experiences and to be a human being, to be a man, and be comfortable in my skin, and learn to apply the same principles that are preached but not practiced by many dogmatic institutions and those who follow dogma versus spirituality, as I like to make that distinction, to practice the very things that I always believed in and that I was taught. And so when I'm faced with somebody who's just frothing at the mouth simply because of who I am, that's okay. I'll let you be in that space. I'll let you, obsess over what other people are doing, because obviously there are things about your life that you don't like, and so you want to focus elsewhere to distract yourself from your own life, and that's okay. I still love you no matter what. Love you, man.
So you mentioned that the time in college and the frat was almost waxing nostalgic about how you felt so comfortable in your own skin and comfortable being a man among men. And so do you ever fantasize or think about like, oh, I'd love to make the adult frat house and have a bunch of people together again, or is that just like no way?
Yes and no. Yeah, I kind of go back between. I do kind of go back and forth between. Yeah, that'd be so awesome. It's like, oh hell no.
Yeah.
So yeah, I go to both extremes. In the end, I realized that that was a very good and incredible time of my life. I'm really grateful that I had it. I would prefer to have the more adult experience now. I mean, it wasn't very much an adult experience, but I think I would rather have an experience now that is more aligned with who I am now, based off of, the progress that I've made, the things I've discovered about myself, the totality of who I am, something that's more aligned with that experience versus, trying to recreate something that I've already done.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, again, your experience, my experience with the Mankind Project, it really proves to me for the first time the value, the synchronicity, the support of being around other men, or even I believe the same. Women gathering around women, and they seem to do it more often in a healthier way than kind of traditionally. In my viewpoint, a gathering of men almost like brought out the worst aspects of other men.
Right. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And that can happen, particularly if it's one of those those gatherings that focuses on all of the the stereotypical things that are supposed to define what a man is, or especially a straight man.
Yeah. Yeah. Right, just some debauchery fest and
yeah, exactly. And to see groups like the Mankind Project, and other groups that are out there are focusing on being responsible, just accepting yourself, accepting and loving yourself as a human being.
Even generations before ours. I don't have any personal experience with the Lodge and the Knights of Columbus and the Moose and the Elks and all of these different things that a lot of them existed, but they were all men-only groups.
They were fraternal organizations, absolutely. In fact, fraternities really didn't start off as what they are now. They've evolved into what they are now, but the Greek letter societies started off as more an academic pursuit. So, men coming together to pursue mutual interests, particularly not economic, but mutual academic interests. But many of those older organizations still had a very rigid set of rules that you still had to adhere to. And if you fell outside of what was deemed acceptable or appropriate, then you're gone, you're out. And so, yeah, they were a predecessor. They served a purpose, and they did a lot of good. But to me, the next step and the next evolution of men's organizations in general is the men's organization that allows a man to define for himself who he is, what he is, and how he wishes to live his life, and how he wants to relate to other men, and to do so in a supportive environment in which there aren't necessarily rules, but there are certainly good examples, and there are examples of what it means to be what it means to be a healthy, well-adjusted man.
Yeah, and ideally, your own peer group does that.
Yes,
but most aren't.
Right, exactly.
To open there, aren't mentally, secretly, yes, they would support me, or maybe you assume the opposite, that even though they're my friends, they're all not supporting me in whatever I'm going to be doing. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, if you want to be emotional, great. If you want to be stoic, great. It doesn't matter. The fact that you are there, comfortable as yourself, you can be yourself, and that there is going to be no judgment whatsoever, and that support, in that brotherhood. To me, that's like that's the platinum standard.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this is I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've definitely learned some of your experiences and just aspects of them that I was not familiar with at all. I'm glad we're both comfortable being a man among men, and the different paths that get us there, and to share, just to point out that there's infinite paths to get all of our listeners wherever they want to go as well. And it's take the step, push that boundary. Don't just settle for especially if you don't feel good where you are, don't settle for that feeling.
Indeed. You know, our paths are infinitely unique, and yet they can all run parallel to each other.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, again, this has been wonderful. Thank you, Appio, for sharing so much about your own experiences again. And everyone can join us live next Tuesday, November 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern for another episode of Real Men Feel. We'll be joined by shaman Brad Little Frog Hudson. Talk about the path of a shaman and what does that mean? And how does one become a shaman if you wanted to? Why would you want to? How did Brad do it? What's it all about? So again, I think it'll be really interesting and again be some firsthand experiences about, you know, a man and his journey, because we're all on them.
And Brad's freaking awesome.
Yeah. Brad's a good man. So until then, check out realmenfeel.org. Consider joining our private Facebook group and give us a review, subscribe on iTunes, give us some feedback. Tell us what you'd like to hear next. Tell us what you want to hear never again from us. You know, it's all good. We're open to it all.
Absolutely, yes.
So we bid you adieu, and whenever you're listening to this, good luck. Next president, whoever you may be.
Right? Exactly. It doesn't matter. We're all you know, coming together for the better good. So it doesn't really matter who's president.
All right. Thanks for listening.
All right. Take care.